Christopher, do you want to just welcome everybody and get things underway as I guess we're just past the hour now.
Yeah, this is Christopher Kirby. I'm on the executive committee of the Northern California Williams Regional Association, and am delighted to have this presentation with Tim Shaw. Before I get started with the introductions, I just wanted to make an announcement, a friendly reminder that we've enabled the live closed caption at the bottom, and if you want to turn that off or turn that on, just hit subtitles down on the bottom of your screen. I'm pleased to introduce Tim Shaw for his second presentation with Williams NorCal. We've hopefully got some people all along up and down the West Coast for this particular presentation. Tim Shaw is a classics major at Williams, graduated in 1989, and he took a very non-traditional career path for a Williams alumni. He became a chef. He's received an A.O.S. From the French Culinary Institute, an MA in Food Studies from New York University, and a Master's of Public Administration in Sustainable Management from the Presidio Graduate School. In the early part of his career, Tim was a chef, handled his own catering business in New York City for 10 years, and was a private chef for what Tim describes as many cool celebrities. For the past 15 years, Tim has been an educator, currently working as an adjunct lecturer at San Francisco State University. And also during the past year, he's taught online culinary and hospitality classes in Sunnydale. Today, Tim will be focusing on a vegetarian dish, namely chickpea and sweet potato tagine with olives and dates, and that will also have a grilled chicken option, which he'll be talking about, and that'll be paired with the watermelon, feta, and mint salad. Just to let you know that this will have audience questions. If you do have a question during the course of today's demo, just put it in the chat box, and Tim and I will be watching that, and he'll be able to answer those at the appropriate time. There also will be Q&A at the end as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim Shaw.
All right, am I not muted? Yes, excellent. Hi, my name's Tim. That was thank you for that introduction. As Chris said, I was a classics major at Williams College. I thought I wanted to be an archaeologist and go to be Indiana Jones, but I went on a dig my junior year, the summer of 1988, to Greece, and found out that archaeology is a little boring, but I fell in love with food. My mom was not a very good cook. I grew up eating microwavable boiled stuff. And when I was in Greece, to get to the field, we had to walk through, to get to the site, we had to walk through like a field of wild fennel and garlic and just these smells and this fish, and the food in Greece was just amazing. And when I got back, I just randomly took a restaurant job at the Orchards. I was a waiter for the summer at the Orchards and just fell in love with everything about the restaurant industry. And kind of never looked back. I graduated and my parents are like, we didn't just send you to this amazing school for you to become a cook, but I loved it. And so I worked in restaurants in New York. As you said, I had my own catering company. I worked for Martha Stewart. I did recipe testing for The Joy of Cooking, some writing for Savor magazine, and started teaching after I got a master's degree in food and nutrition, and haven't really looked back. I still have the dream of maybe having my own restaurant at some point. I was talking with the owners of the Mill on the Floss, which is a restaurant that I worked at in Williamstown, because they put it up for sale, and they were like, they knew I'd always wanted to buy it, and they're like, come back. And I'm like, I don't think I'm done with teaching yet, and I don't think I'm ready to leave the Bay Area quite yet. So the timing wasn't right, but we're still chatting. But thank you for showing up. This is while we were in COVID over the last year, I've done probably 15 of these online demos. They're a lot of fun. They provide me and my husband dinner for the evening, which is always nice. I chose this dish when we were talking about what to do. Last time we did a cioppino, which is a very Bay Area seafood stew, Italian seafood stew. And I thought that this dish was an interesting one to do because usually when you're doing a dinner party or when you're, a buffet or a wedding or whatever, you generally come up with a menu and then we'll like throw in one or two sort of vegetarian options. And it always sort of, to me, comes off as like an afterthought. I'm not a vegetarian. I eat very plant-based food, but I'm not myself a vegetarian. And this dish, I think, is a great example of a dish that can stand on its own and be the centerpiece of a really amazing meal, and then just put some meat on the side for people, who have to have meat. So to that end, I did this ahead of time because I live in Pacifica and I wasn't sure if it was going to get foggy or windy. So I just grilled off some chicken thighs. I not marinated them, but I tossed them with the spices that we're going to use in the tagine, which are some cumin, some coriander, a little bit of cinnamon, some red peppers, crushed red pepper, just so the flavors match the stew. But they're just sort of a side. The meat is the side dish for this meal. And hopefully you all got the recipe, and it's a recipe I like to use, particularly in class when we're teaching people how to cook, because it's a recipe that's based more on a technique than sort of the specificity of the recipe. A lot of recipes, well, not a lot of recipes, all recipes are always written to somebody else's palate, to somebody else's sort of flavor preferences. So when I'm teaching and when I taught at the French Culinary Institute in New York, we really tried to teach people the technique behind the recipe, rather than just the recipe itself, because it's if you're just following a recipe verbatim, you're making somebody else's food. And if you become more confident in looking at a recipe and knowing what your palate is, knowing what flavor elements you like, you can customize a recipe that you get from online or from a book or whatever to fit your own palate and your own sort of flavor preferences. Because the bottom line is a lot of recipes just don't work. They're not tested. Somebody just writes it up, and it's a weird sort of culinary education world that we live in, and that it's so recipe based, when a lot of recipes, they just don't work. A lot of recipes are designed to not work. Like Emeril Lagasse's books sort of famously don't work, because he's not trying to teach you how to cook. He's trying to get you to buy his stuff. So the whole idea behind like Emeril's books is, if you make a recipe and you're like, it's not really all that great, maybe if I have Emeril's pots and pans, or maybe if I buy Emeril's sauces, the recipe will be better. Which is, it's not a bad thing, but he's selling Emeril. He's not selling he's not trying to get people to learn how to cook. As an educator trying to get people to learn how to cook, I much more like to focus on the techniques behind the recipe, so that you can alter it to fit your own palates, which is why on the recipe, it's very basics. We're building up the layers of the flavor in this stew, which is a sort of a Moroccan flavored stew, but this technique of sweating the vegetables, adding certain things at certain times to layer the flavors, would be used for a French soup, or even a pho or enchiladas or whatever. It's all about layering the flavors and trusting your own palate, which is why at the end of the recipe I have variations. If it calls for 2 garlic cloves, if you love garlic, put in 10 garlic cloves. If you think cinnamon sounds weird with chickpeas and dates, taking the cinnamon out's not going to change it. It's going, it'll just make it more palatable for you. So what I want to do is do a couple quick techniques, show you how to build up the stew so I can get that cooking, because the potatoes are going to take about 20 minutes to cook. While that's cooking, I'll show you how to assemble this it's very simple, but it's a super salad, particularly for this super salad, not soup or salad, which is great for the summer, since watermelons are really starting to come into season. And I chose this mainly because it's called a sweet potato, but I am going to use, and I'm going to show you, because a lot of people ask what's the difference. Hold on. Between a sweet potato and a yam. And I'm using some sweet potatoes and some yams. We call sweet potatoes in the we call sweet potatoes in the United States yams. Technically, they're completely different tubers, completely different plants. Sweet potatoes, if you plant them, grow into like morning glory flowers, really, really beautiful. They're in that family of plant. Yams, which are a different tuber, grow into lilies. So if you planted these, it would grow into a lily. The beautiful thing about real sweet potato, real yams, is that they're purple on the inside. So I have some diced sweet potato, which is yellow, some white diced sweet potato, which is white, and some diced yams, which are purple. So it's purple and yellow for the Williams colors. So we could call this a Williams College Tagine. And basically all I did with these is I peeled them, and you can see that the yam, the way you tell the difference as well is that yams tend to be very, very small, and some sweet potatoes could be like the size of my forearm. They're huge. So I'm using a combination. The yams tend to be starchier. They're not particularly sweet. The good thing about cooking with yams and sweet potatoes, unlike potatoes, which again are not related to these, is you can cut them ahead of time and they don't oxidize. Like potatoes will start to turn brown, but this is a great thing to prep even a day ahead of time, so you're just ready to cook it when you're ready to cook it. And the dish is called a tagine. A tagine is sort of the North African term for a stew. It's also the cooking vessel. If I was really making like a real authentic tagine, I would use this. I'd basically throw all the ingredients in, put the top on, and just let it bake in the oven for about 2 or 3 hours. We obviously don't have time for this. And since it's just me and my husband, this would serve us for a week. So I don't really want to make all that much food. But if you see the word tagine, it's the word for stew, and it's also the word for the cooking vessel. That's a great thing to use if you have an oven that's big enough to fit it. So to get this going, let me turn my camera down. I just want to show a couple real quick techniques. I have it sitting on a case of seltzer water. Hopefully that's going to stay there. The first one, as I mentioned with garlic, it shows sort of just garlic itself shows the limitation of just following a recipe blindly, because this recipe, it calls for 2 garlic cloves. That's a very imprecise measurement because this small little thing is a garlic clove and this really large one is a garlic clove. What do they mean by 2 garlic cloves? Basically means however much garlic you like. I don't love garlic. I like a moderate amount of garlic in cooking. I don't love things to be overly garlicky unless they're supposed to be overly garlicky. The easiest way to work with garlic so that not everything ends up tasting like garlic on your cutting board. You may have seen this on a cooking show. Let's get that in there. There we go. Rather than sitting here and chopping with your knife and mincing, the easiest way to get garlic into a nice mince is to take the side of your knife and just kind of mash it between the cutting board and your knife. And that way your hands aren't going to smell like garlic and you're getting all of the juices there. You could do this in a garlic press, but I find a garlic press kind of leaves more behind than I like. And if I'm just using this like this, it gets nice and finely chopped without, again, having to sit there going like this, which releases all of the juices and then can burn your eyes the way that onions can burn your eyes. And then the second technique is how to cut an onion properly. Everybody's got a sort of folklore about the way you cut an onion without getting your eyes to burn. I've never found a way to do it without getting my eyes to burn. If I put my contacts in, I could cut 30 onions and they wouldn't bother my eyes. With my glasses on, onions just burn your eyes. That's sort of the nature of what onions are. So the way you really want to work with onions is you want to do it fast And you want to, as I just did with the garlic, you want to do fine, precise cuts rather than sitting here chopping away, because the more you chop at the onion, the more you're releasing those sort of sulfur compounds, and the more that's going to burn your eyes. So you might have seen this technique if you watch cooking shows. What I'm going to do is I cut the onion in half and I peeled the outside. I'm going to save all of this in a bowl, because in my freezer, I have a Ziploc bag with onion peelings and pieces of carrots and pieces of celery. And I use that to make vegetable stock or chicken stock anytime that I'm going to be making stock. But this onion's already starting to burn my eyes, so let me stop talking and do it. The easiest way to cut an onion is, first you want to make sure you have a really, really sharp knife. I'm going to make one cut kind of parallel to the cutting board, but I'm not cutting all the way through the root, because the root's going to hold it together. And then I'm going to make 5 or 6 cuts perpendicular to the cutting board, but again, not all the way through the root. So it's all held together. And then when I go back, I can make really nice, you can do this as fine or as coarse as you want, but just with those 3 movements, I've got beautifully cut onions, and I can get them into the stove before they're starting to burn my eyes. So mashing garlic using the side of your knife and then cutting your onion into nice, really small dice is a really, really great technique to learn. I'll do it one more time just in case you missed it. And again, this I'm going to save. I even save the skins. They give your stocks a really nice golden color. But I cut through, not through the root. And I'll do sort of bigger chunks here, and then I'll just save this. And then, boom, you get these nice, beautifully even cut onions, and you get them out of the way before they start to burn your eyes. So super, super easy. The other ingredients that I'm going to use right away is I have some canned tomatoes. I like to buy the whole tomatoes because I just find the quality better when you crush them yourself. I will tell you, because people will sometimes ask what brand. These are Muir Glen, not because I'm saying Muir Glen are the best tomatoes, but they were 3 for $5 at Safeway. So I bought them. I like to buy, this is the brand I love to use. They're called Muti from Italy. This is about $7. I didn't know I had this in my cabinet, otherwise I would have used them. But sometimes you have to just buy something because it's on sale. What I'm noticing about the Muir Glen is it's very, very liquidy. So I'm going to squeeze the tomatoes by hand, and then I'm not going to use so much of the juice because it is very watery. But I find the flavor of the whole tomatoes generally is a fresher tomato flavor than if you buy them already crushed, or particularly if you buy like a tomato puree, which I might buy if I was making pizza or something. But I think even with that, I'd buy the whole ones and crush them myself. Just because even just smelling this, they smell like really super fresh tomatoes. So I think the product is just nicer when you get it whole. Adam, could you come be my cameraman? Hold on, I'm getting my cameraman. And then the spices I have some coriander, some cumin, some cinnamon, and some red pepper flakes. Those are sort of very traditional Moroccan spices. This again would be where you could do your own palette if you really love hot spicy spices. You could put in cayenne. You could use, I don't know, maybe garam masala, something with more flavor depth. But I had these. They were already peeled or already ground. But I'm going to show you how we're going to toast those. So carry that over here. Stand over here. There we go. We've done this several times already. All right, so I'm going to turn on my heat on my stove. I'm using some olive oil. Not too much. This is California olive ranch olive oil. I like this olive oil. It's not too expensive. It's got a decent flavor. It's good to cook with and also make dressings and stuff with. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my onions, and I want to sweat my onions. You'll notice if you read recipes, lots of recipes, whether it's a soup, coming a little closer. There you go. Whether it's a soup or a stew or a braise, is going to start out with sweating your aromatic vegetables. Aromatics would be onions, leeks, shallots, carrots, celery. The carrots could be used in this recipe. I think you have enough sweetness and enough color from the sweet potatoes that I think onions are pretty much all you really need here. But you'll notice that really any cuisine from around the world, whether it's a Mexican mole sauce, is going to start with onions and peppers and garlic. A stir fry might start with some ginger and garlic. There's the aromatic vegetables are there. They're kind of the base notes that you have in a lot of different recipes. And by sweating, what I'm doing by sweating is I don't really want the color to change. Sweating is different from sauteing. Onions are about 80–85% water. When you're sweating the aromatics, all you're doing is getting the water to evaporate. And when the water evaporates, what you're left with is more flavor of onion. That's why it's called sweat. Like when you sweat, you release water. So you're concentrating the flavor without trying to get too much color. And if you get a little color, it's fine. If I went on and completely sauteed these so they're nice and beautiful and brown, that would make a good French onion soup, or a little heartier if it was a little colder out. It's like 70 degrees in Pacifica today. So we want it to be nice and fresh. You got to enjoy the beautiful weather when we can. And they're starting to get a little translucent. So I'm going to add my spices. Spices, particularly these aromatic spices. Wow, that just hit right away. That smells so good. You want them to cook for a little while because it activates the sort of the volatile oils and makes it smell really good and really accentuates the flavor, rather than, whereas herbs you tend to stir in at the last minute, that maintains their freshness. Spices generally do best with a little bit of toasting. That sounds good, doesn't it? You can say yes.
Yes.
Yes. And then finally, I'm going to add in my garlic. I generally don't add in my garlic first because garlic is very high in sugar and it browns very, very quickly. And I don't really love that toasted flavor of garlic. So I kind of add that right before I add the tomato sauce. Now that's smelling super fragrant. So I am going to use a spoon. I'm going to pull out my crushed tomatoes. Beautiful. Boom, 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 boom. I'll save some of that. And into this, I'm going to put in a little bit of salt. And just about that much salt, I think, is fine. That's really up to you. Yum, delicious. Okay, we got 6:24. So if these go for about 20 minutes, I think they'll be good. Then what I'm going to add is my purple potatoes, my purple yams, my sweet potatoes. And since there's not a lot of liquid in there, I'm going to put in some vegetable stock. You could use water if you've just got water. If you're making this with chicken, you could use chicken stock, but the liquid helps the potatoes cook. And then not the right lid. I thought I could make it work. There we go. All right, thank you. I'll call you back when I need you. All right, that's my cameraman. So I'm just going to let that cook for about 20 or 25 minutes, and then I'm going to finish it off with some dates. I have some chopped dates and some chopped olives. And the olives I use, I will tell you specifically. I have the Kirkland Spanish Queen olives because I had them. I also had a dinner party recently, so I happened to have some Picheline olives. I'm going to save this juice for some dirty martinis later on this month. If you prefer black olives, you can use black olives. What this is adding is, again, a lot of North African Mediterranean dishes have that sort of salty note of capers or olives or anchovies. In Southeast Asian cuisine, it would be like a fish sauce, but it gives a saltiness. It gives an umami flavor to the dish, which then is counterbalanced with the sweetness of the dates. So it's a great flavor combination. And as I mentioned in the recipe, if you don't like dates, you could use apricots. You could like dried apricots. You could use raisins, golden, like the golden yellow raisins would be really good in this. If you don't love olives, you could put in capers. If you don't like those, just something to balance out the sweetness would go really, really well in there as well. And then the last sort of technique I'm going to show you for this, which will also lead me to making our salad. I want to get the garlic flavor off. Actually, I'll flip it over. I don't want my watermelon to taste garlicky. Any questions? No. Okay. I have some parsley that I'm going to use on the stew when it's done. And again, whereas spices, you want to toast them in the heat because that accentuates their flavor. Fresh herbs go best when they're added right at the last minute. It keeps their freshness, particularly in a dish like this that has the tomato sauce. If I stirred the parsley in or whatever I'm putting in there, the tomato sauce, the acidity of the tomato sauce would cause the herbs to lose their brightness, and you still get some of the flavor, but they would start to be a little brown after a while. I generally do this dish with cilantro, but the cilantro at Safeway yesterday was really awful. I was kind of embarrassed that they were actually selling it. It was limp and they were really small leaves and they just did not look good. So I bought some parsley. And what I'm doing with the fresh herbs is to cut herbs. Again, you see a lot of people will sit here and mash the herbs with their knife like this. If you're doing that and you end up with a lot of green on your cutting board, that's the flavor. So when you're cutting herbs like parsley or cilantro or mint, the best thing to do is pull off the leaves, basil as well, any of the sort of fresh green, and cut them into a ball and then just go over them once and try to get as fine or as coarse as you want. But the less you cut them, the more flavor is going to stay in the herb. And so I just went over that once. They're nice and cut. It's nice. It's going to look nice on top of the stew. And I also don't have a bunch of green. You wouldn't really see it because it's a green cutting board. But if you're chopping, you're really kind of pureeing the parsley or pureeing the mint. And then all of the oils that make it taste good are going to be on the cutting board. So I have the parsley for that. Then I'm going to also take the mint, which just smells fantastic. And I'm going to do the same kind of very rough dice. Boom, boom, boom. And this is going to go on my watermelon, feta, and mint salad. So I've got my mint, got my parsley. Let me get my watermelon. I just bought this watermelon yesterday, and I'm very excited because it's very, very fresh, considering it's still sort of early in the season. The way I want to cut my watermelon is I want to cut off all of the rind. I'm flying home to New England to see my dad for the first time since COVID. Otherwise, I would save these rinds and I would pickle them or juice them because they're very flavorful. But since I'm going to be gone for most of a month, I'm just going to compost them. But if you wanted to peel the green, this white part of the watermelon is really delicious as a summer pickle. But I'm not going to be fussy today. And then basically, I want to cut this to look, since we're doing everything sort of chickpea size, I kind of want to cut it, and they're very easy to cut because they kind of hold together. I'm not putting any effort into the knife. Not much chance I'm going to cut myself. And then you end up with really beautiful slices that are going to look nice on a plate. Again, this salad, if you looked at the recipe and read the recipe, it's not really so much a recipe as basically a technique for making a vinaigrette. And this is a perfect example if we were in class, in a cooking class with students. If we had 15 people and I said, okay, here's vinegar, here's olive oil, here's salt, make a vinaigrette, you're going to get 15 totally different tasting vinaigrettes, because one person's might be a little saltier, one might be a little bit more acidic, one might be a little more oily. It all depends on what your palate likes. So again, if you're reading a recipe that says it needs 3 tablespoons oil and a tablespoon of vinegar, that might be completely wrong for you. I have a lemon here. Oh, I have it over here. And what I'm going to do, because I don't want just the acidity of the lemon and the rind, there's really a lot of flavor. That smells great. I'm going to put in a little bit of the lemon rind. I have a little bit of lemon juice from my other lemon. And in general, a general guideline is going to be about 1 part acid to 3 parts oil. Meaning if you use a tablespoon of lemon juice, you're going to need about 3 tablespoons of oil. But that's not a hard and fast rule, because different lemons are higher level of acidity or lower level of acidity than other lemons. Different vinegars, like a sherry wine vinegar, might be 6 or 7% acidity, whereas like a rice wine vinegar might only be 3%. So it's going to be much less acidic. So it's really just a matter of adding ingredients and stopping when it tastes good to you. So I'm going to put in, there's a little bit of salt, a little bit of lemon juice. I need a fork. And this is a really simple vinaigrette because the watermelon is so fresh, and because the feta, the mint is so fresh. I don't want to put in garlic or mustard or anything. You could if you wanted to, but I think that just gets a little busy. I think a little bit more oil. And something to keep in mind is extra virgin olive oils have their own kind of level of acidity. So they're going to add something to the flavor as well. That's a really nice olive oil. And then just a little bit of black pepper, because why not? This is a salad that some dressings or some salads like this, you can dress them a couple hours ahead of time. This really does best if it's dressed right before you serve it, because even just having cut it, you can see there's, I don't know if you can see it. I'm just going to pour out. There's about an inch of watermelon juice at the bottom of my bowl. And if I dress it, that's going to pull out a lot of the flavor of the watermelon, and it's going to end up kind of a mess. So I'm going to dress it right before I plate it. And it really is that simple. It's just mint. It's just watermelon. Boom. Smells like summer. Put this over here. Let me get my plate. And this salad, again, as a basic technique, you could do this with some arugula, put it on top of some arugula, maybe some, I don't know, it might overpower mesclun greens or spinach or something like that. But like a nice peppery arugula or interesting green if you really wanted some extra greens. But I think with the mint and then the feta, That's all you need. I didn't want this sitting at room temperature because it's getting warm in here. And if you were doing this vegan, obviously you don't need the feta, but it adds a nice saltiness. Lovely. You know, it would actually just be delicious with this. This would be delicious with grilled shrimp on top. I think everything is good with grilled shrimp. Oh, I'm sorry, you're not seeing it. So I have my watermelon, my mint, and my feta salad. See the juice coming off? That's just from having sat there for a while. So I'm going to sit this to the side. We'll see that at the end when we're done. It really is an amazingly fresh watermelon for this early in the season. Oh. Those potatoes only have about a minute or two left. Any questions while the stew is finishing cooking?
And feel free, this is Christopher, feel free to unmute yourself and if you want to ask a question that way or put it in the chat, either way.
Is anybody else cooking along? Usually get a couple people do it. Oh, I see a couple people doing it. Cool, cool, cool. All right, so what I will do, cameraman. He's on his union break. Bring him over here, please. All right, so see those purple potatoes are just beautiful in there. If I was doing this, if we weren't doing this for a demo, I would let this cook for another, I don't know, 20 minutes or 30 minutes or so, but the potatoes are cooked, so they are kind of ready to go. I'm gonna stir in my chickpeas. And again, if you noticed, I cut the potatoes, I cut the onions. When you're doing a stew like this, you want everything to be sort of relatively the same size. So I cut the chickpeas, I cut the potatoes so that they didn't stand out too much. They blend in with the chickpeas. And if you don't like chickpeas, this would be great with like butter beans or lima beans or something along those lines, even little white beans. I'm gonna stir in my dates. You don't like white beans? And that way the dates are going to kind of absorb some of that tomato liquid. And then I'm going to finish with my olives. Beautiful colors. So let's let that cook. I'm going to let that cook for about 5 minutes, not even that long, just to let the chickpeas heat through. Let me get my platter. Yeah, I don't need you anymore. Thank you. All right. Yay. Oh, raised hand. If you want to just type your questions into the chat, that can work too.
I think the chat's disabled.
Oh, the chat is disabled. Okay. So then just unmute and let's see who has a question first.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm May.
How are you?
I have a question, a technique question.
Okay.
How do you recommend to most easily get the olives off of the pit?
Oh, I wish I had some olives that had pits. There's honestly, the main ones that you get with the pits in them are like the niçoise, and there's really no delicate way to do it. You just kind of push your thumb down and kind of squeeze them out. The bigger olives, you can use like a cherry pitter. If you have a cherry pitter, it's a little tool. I don't use one because I just kind of peel them. But the easiest way I find is you put I'll show you with an actual olive. I'll even show you with a chickpea. You just literally, you just put the olive on the cutting board and you just press it with your thumb until it kind of splits, and then the pit comes out. I tend to buy them pitted, especially if you're doing it for a party of, 100 people or so. Yeah, but for the bigger olives, you can use a cherry pitter if you don't mind, having little gadgets around. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. I just did that with a bunch of cherries. I got like 3 quarts of cherries and my shirt was covered in cherry juice. They were so delicious.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Lee has a question.
Yeah, hi, thanks for doing this. This is
No
great.
problem.
I used ground coriander instead of coriander seeds. If you're substituting like that, like I just used a lot less. Is that right?
This was ground coriander. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The coriander, if you have the seeds, you can grind them yourself. The only benefit of doing that is like whole spices, they last longer than already ground spices. So if I was doing this for a dinner party or something, I'd use the the whole coriander and just grind it myself. You get a little bit more flavor from that. I tend to buy from Penzeys. I don't love like recommending brands or something because they sell in really small bottles. So they tend to be quite fresh. I'd rather buy like a 1/10 of an ounce every year rather than have like this massive jar that you use over 5 or 6 years and eventually starts not tasting like anything. But if you like for this, I used the already ground spices because I didn't think there was enough time to grind them all. So any other questions? Or those are the only 2 that we had questions. Cool. Is there a specific reason why the Tajin cooking vessel? Yes, there is a specific reason. And you see this also with a couple, there's like a braising pot that you can use, like a cast iron braising pot. The sort of the physics of it is, when you're cooking something in here, the liquid sort of condenses on the top and then dribbles back down, and it sort of starts this convection of the liquid. So it sort of braises itself as it cooks. So it condenses up here in the middle and then sort of drips down and back into the pot. I've used them. I don't know if it actually makes that big of a difference, but that's the reason why it's shaped like it is in this sort of pillar. So it's like a chimney or like a distillation. It starts the convection and keeps the liquid sort of constantly braising over a couple hours. What other cheeses could you use? That's kind of up to your own taste. There are other sort of fresh cheeses like this that are not brined. If you don't like if the reason you don't like the feta is because of the brine. So something like a cotija cheese, Cotija, which is it's the same kind of crumbly cheese that's used in tacos and in Oaxacan cooking and stuff like that. It's got the same texture and the same saltiness, but it's not brined. So if you don't like feta, I think that would be a good one. Or a queso fresco would be good as well, I think. Anything like cheddars or something like that, I think that's a little bit more complicated than you want, because you really want the watermelon to kind of stand out here, and the feta just kind of adds the saltiness, which again, some people don't particularly like. Jan, you have a question? Oh, wait, here's one question about cooking pan.
Hi.
You go ahead first, Jan.
Oh, yeah, thanks. So I had whole chickpeas, like not in the can. I had dried chickpeas.
Yep.
And so I'm using, I have to let them cook for an hour. But my question, I use the whole spices, which I ground up. Do I need to adjust the spices and add more because I'm using dried chickpeas? Or would I use the same amount of spices? In other words, a tablespoon of cumin, a tablespoon of coriander, and a teaspoon of cinnamon, and etc.
That ratio of spices I've found is a good ratio to the 2 cups of cooked chickpeas.
Okay.
So when you cook the chickpeas, if you have like 8 cups of chickpeas once they're cooked, then you would adjust it if you've got more of the chickpeas. But again, the spices are all something that you're going to want to taste for yourself and add according to your own palate. But yes, if you notice the way the recipe is written, the ratio is about 2 cups chickpeas, 2 cups potatoes, and that amount of spice should flavor that quite adequately. But if you're using all the chickpeas to make this, then you'd probably need a little bit more spice for that, for sure.
Okay, should be about the same. And I used carrots, that's all I had, lots of carrots and.
Lots of carrots? Perfect. I mean, they're delicious in different colors and stuff too. They're perfectly fine. The last time I did this, they just had a butternut squash. They're like, can I use butternut squash? And I'm like, I don't know, try it. Let me know how it tastes. And they said it tasted perfect. But they said that because butternut squash, it's not as starchy as the potatoes. They said they did kind of start to fall apart and become more kind of soupy than they wanted. But they said it tasted delicious. So that sounds great. And a question, a favorite brand of cooking pan? Yes. I love All-Clad. I know they're expensive. There is, if you Google like All-Clad seconds, there's a couple stores that sell them. Like one of my pots is like a $300 pot. It had a scratch in the bottom. So I got it for like $70. I don't care if it has a scratch in the bottom because I'm going to scratch it up as I use them. But All-Clad pans, they're worth the cost because I mean, some of these pans I've had for 30 years and they're just great. You know, so I buy them on sale or I'll buy them at outlets or I'll buy them like that. And I mean, it was easy for me because for a while they were tax write-offs as well. So I like All-Clad for stainless steel. And you can't go wrong with Lodge cast iron pans. They last forever. They're cheap, they're heavy, but cast iron is really, really great for a lot of stuff. And my husband's grandparents passed away about 2 years ago and left us maybe 40 cast iron pans that were, I mean, some of them are probably older than me. They're really, really beautifully seasoned. Yeah, but All-Clad is really great. It's my personal favorite. It's, you know, there are others. Calphalon is good. The ones I try to stay away from, again, are the ones that sort of have celebrity endorsements because they tend to me, I haven't seen one that's really this better, and they tend to be a little cheap, and you know, you're paying to use someone's name, and I haven't found any that are really, really all that great. So All-Clad, Lodge, and of course Le Creuset is fantastic, but they're very expensive in terms of the cast iron, the enameled cast iron. Okay, so let us set this up here. So I'm going to take, it smells so good. It's gonna make a nice dinner. I just love the purple. And it was really funny when this sweet potato isn't as yellow as the last one I did. It really, when I did that for San Francisco State alumni, and I saw it and I was like, oh, that's gonna be a perfect dish for the next time I cook for Williams. And some nice parsley on top. Another great garnish on this would be, any kind of nuts. If you wanted to do some toasted almonds or some pistachios, would be delicious on top of this. So we've got that. Oh, what I need to finish with, talking about a complete afterthought, is just as I mentioned, I grilled these chickens off right before we started because I didn't know it was going to be so sunny here in Pacifica now. And all I did was toss them with the spices. And I'm going to, when I grill, I like to grill the thighs because I find the breasts get really, really dried out. These are hotter than I'm used to. You know, that and my hands over COVID have lost their ability to hold hot things. And this I will put on a little platter. So instead of having a main meat dish and then a side of vegetables, we're having a nice vegan dish with a side of meat. I think I will put a little bit more parsley on top of the chicken. Boom, 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 boom. And then let me get my salad. Let me get my knives out of the way. There we go. Can you see all that? My chicken, my salad, my tagine. That's going to get us through. That's about 2 meals for us. Would you serve this on top of couscous? Yes, and I mentioned that in the recipe. I have some rice that we're going to serve it with as well. I just forgot to pull it out. It's in the fridge. If it looks too liquidy, you can scoop it out with like scoop out the solids and leave some of the liquid behind. The danger of just continuing to cook the liquid is you might overcook the potatoes and you might overcook the stuff. So if you're finding a lot of liquid left behind, pull out the solids and then cook the liquid down. That can happen, like with this one, these tomatoes were particularly liquidy. Or you can just add in some more dates and they can absorb some of the liquid. Yeah, I'm surprised nobody asked about wine. Generally, people ask like, what kind of wine would you drink with this? I would say yes. I tend to like, I'm not really a wine snob, but I don't love Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay. I think with the spiciness in this and with all of those flavors, this would be much more interesting with like an Albarino or a Torrontés or like a Spanish white. A Vino Verde would be great because it's, again, this is sort of a Moroccan dish and Spain and Morocco are kind of in the same geographic area, same climate. So those grapes in Spanish wines, I think would go really, really deliciously with this. A red wine would be okay if it was a lighter red wine like a Pinot, but Pinot is my favorite wine, so I drink that with everything. Any other questions? If it's too liquid, yeah, I got that too liquidy menu. Oh, well, thank you very much. This is fun. I love doing this, but it really was weird this whole year. I had like 120 high school students that I was trying to teach culinary classes to, and the whole fun of being, oh, an Algerian red, that would be fantastic. A Greek red would go well as well. But the whole fun of cooking is like being in a kitchen together, you know, and listening to music and then tasting everybody's food. And, you know, it's very rarely do you end up spitting a student's food out, but it happens a couple of times. But the fun part is being in a kitchen and sharing that camaraderie. That's what food is all about, and that's what teaching is about. So it's been, I've loved doing these demos because it's as you can tell, I can just start talking and just go on. But it's very fun. I don't know if I just love being a Williams grad who's a chef. I still keep trying to telling everybody in the alumni office, you know, when you sign on to the website, there's that little pull down menu where they have ambassador, senator, you know, all of these like honorifics, and they still don't have chef. So one of these days, I always corner Brooks when I see him at reunions. And I'm like, come on, man, there's got to be more than one of us. And there actually are. I've talked to several others. So a favorite cuisine, you know what? Honestly, my favorite thing to teach, I love making handmade pasta. I love rolling it out. And I don't necessarily I don't love eating pasta. I like pasta, but I could hand roll pasta every day. All the different shapes, you know, whether they're rolled or whether like the little orecchiettis or something like that. I'll do a pasta class for sure. It's hard to teach online because it's all about the feel and the texture of the dough. But you know, we made it work, and I did do a couple of videos for it. You know what? I haven't done gluten-free pasta. Gluten-free, it's a real different science. I mean, I've made buckwheat noodles, but buckwheat noodles still have a little flour in them. But I've never really had the call to make gluten-free pastas, so I haven't really played with it. You need to use xanthan gum or some kind of acacia gum or something to replicate that structure of gluten. And I've never tried it, but I would, after my IG story, your daughter bought a pasta rack. That's awesome. That's very, very cool. I love that. So pastas, and I also love making stuff like stews, something like a pho that cooks for like 3 days, or a slow braised short ribs in the middle of winter. That's one of the main things I miss about being on the East Coast, is it's I make stews and stuff here, and I've acclimated where now 55 degrees is freezing. But there's something about like a snowy day in New England where the whole house smells like rosemary and pot roast, and it's just so warming. So those are my two favorite things. And I love Vietnamese food. I've made some, but it's an interesting combination of Southeast Asian techniques and ingredients with sort of French influence from colonization. But the Vietnamese, Italian food and stews, I love. So yeah.
Well, thank you, Tim. You've been terrific.
Thank you.
Before people sign off, in the chat, the first comment in the chat is the link to the recipe if you didn't get that, and also a link to Tim has a couple of things on YouTube, and there's links to those.
Can I just to give the story of that? I started a YouTube channel for my high school kids. And I'm really excited. I had 120 high school students, and I think I'm up to 110 subscribers. So I'm not quite Kardashian range, but for some reason, my New England clam chowder has like 1,100 views. I'm like, that's kind of wild that it went, and it's for high school kids. So it uses canned clams. And I've had friends from New England be like, what are you doing using canned clams? I'm like, just to get the high school students to do anything is a win. I wasn't going to have them go out and get their own clams. But yeah, that's why that started. But thank you all very much. Thank you for showing up. And I know if it's still early here, and I hope you're having as lovely a day as we are here in our little enclave of Pacifica. Thank you very much. And maybe next time we'll do some pasta. I would love that.
Sounds great. Thanks, Tim.
Awesome. Thank you all.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Hey,
you.
That was great.
like,
You.
Tim, are you able to teach classes like on weekends and stuff? I mean, do you do that like in real life, or what do you?
I haven't really so much recently because I've been teaching so much at San Francisco State, and
okay.
These courses on food and culture and nutrition and stuff like that. I did a lot of that when I lived in New York, and people would bachelorette parties or I'd auction myself off for, different charities and stuff. So if you'd like something, I have the whole summer free. So
yeah, okay, great.
I'm not someone who does well with a lot of free time, as my husband would say in the background. So anything I can do to fill my summers would be great.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Tim.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Christopher. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Yes, thank you. All right.